I've been on a mission over the past couple months to play every Fire Emblem game, for the most part, some exceptions. But this is because, despite being a fan of the franchise and playing a lot of the games, I have some serious gaps in knowledge when it comes to certain games in the franchise. One such game was Fire Emblem 6, The Binding Blade, the first and hardest of the Game Boy Advanced games, and the only one I hadn't played through at least once at this point. Funnily enough, Roy is easily the most well-known of the Game Boy Advance lords from these games, considering he's been in Smash forever, but I reckon that his game is the least played of the 3 Game Boy Advance games. This mostly goes to the fact that the game after this one, FE7, The Blazing Sword, was the first game that got shipped out west. Anyway, this video is meant to go over one chapter in particular on my mostly blind playthrough of the game, and why it's so interesting and a fair bit overwhelming at the same time. So let's go to Chapter 16, Storming the I'm Sorry, what? Guess I know where Roy was that day. Anyway, Chapter 16, Retaking the Capital, sees Roy and friends retaking the capital of Etruria from the evil kingdom of Byrne and the revolutionaries that support them. And this chapter immediately does look quite overwhelming for a couple reasons. The first thing that immediately stands out, whether you've played a fair amount of these games or not, is the number of characters on the enemy team with unique portraits. Aside from the boss, Narcian, who you've seen a few times up to this point in the story but haven't had the opportunity to beat up, you have a couple of other minor antagonists you previously met, along with Douglas, a general that you have reason to believe is a pretty nice guy, and Hugh, who is just some guy you've never seen before. Now, this situation becomes a lot simpler as soon as the chapter begins because the 2 minor antagonists, a pair of nobles that planned the uprising you're here to stop, immediately leave once the battle starts, so don't have to worry about them. I guess that's one question answered. Though another unique enemy, Zeiss, I don't know, I'll call him Zeiss, the brother of a character you've already recruited, shows up as well. Okay guys, just what are we doing here? There's too many of you. Also, not to add to this situation, but there is another character that can show up here. Kath is a thief that shows up in a bunch of chapters, and if you have Roy talk to her in 3 of those chapters, she'll join your army. You probably have had her join you already at this point because you've had enough opportunities to, but this is yet another thing to draw your attention to if you haven't recruited her, because she shows up and starts looting chests if she hasn't been recruited. Speaking of recruiting, you as a player, if you've played any of these games before and are mostly going in blind though, you'll have every reason to believe that all 3 of these characters, Hugh, Douglas, and Zeiss, whatever you want to call them, could be recruited during this map, because, well, that's usually how these games work. If a red unit has a unique portrait, isn't a boss, and has some dialogue or scene that implies they aren't evil, you can probably talk to them and get them on your side. And this is true for 2 of 3 of these gentlemen. Zeiss can be recruited by his sister Milady, and Hugh can be recruited by Roy for the low cost of $10,000. You can haggle him for less, but the less you pay him, the lower his stats go, which is funny in and of itself. Douglas, however, cannot be recruited, but you also really can't afford to kill him for a totally different reason. You see, the one thing that I did make sure to look up before starting this game was how to unlock the Gaiden chapters. If you're not familiar, these are basically bonus levels you get from fulfilling certain conditions on the previous level. The condition for the bonus level after this chapter is to ensure that Douglas survives. So if it sounds like I'm talking a lot of nonsense, let me make it really clear where we stand with this chapter at this point. Aside from the obvious objective of killing the boss and taking the throne, which you're doing in a lot of levels, you have to also talk to Hugh with Roy and pay him all the money that Eliwood had saved for Roy's college fund so that he'll join us, have Milady talk to her brother and have him join us, and not kill the man slowly walking towards us in a massive suit of armor with a giant axe, hell-bent on killing one of my units. Fun, right? The funny thing is that that's not even all that's going on in this chapter. On top of making a couple friends and playing the deadliest game of tag with Douglas, the map has a whole bunch of chests in it that you may want to pilfer for various rewards that may help your army. This is yet another enticing side objective to make you think about how you want to handle this chapter. Now, if Kath hasn't been recruited, she'll show up and start looting chests along with another generic thief enemy, which kind of makes this even more complicated, but since we have recruited her, that's actually not a problem for us specifically, but it can add just another layer of whatever's going on here to this already kind of complicated situation you're in. You may have also noticed, just from looking at the map, that this level has 2 paths for you to go through, guiding you towards splitting your army and adding yet another layer of something to this chapter. But that's not too bad. After all, at this point of the game, we have... that's not very nice. Yes, adding another layer of intrigue to this level are the multiple siege tomes present in the level. For those that aren't familiar, siege tomes are basically long-range magic attacks that are balanced by their very limited uses. The range on these tomes is really big, and it's pretty much impossible for none of your units to ever be in range over the course of this level. You're gonna have to dodge or get hit by at least a couple of these shots, probably, unless you find a way to kill these enemies very, very quickly, which is easier said than done. So let's reorganize our little list of objectives on this map now that I think we really have our bases covered. Obviously, we have to kill the boss and take the throne. That's just something we outright have to do. We have to give the GDP of a small nation to have Hugh fight alongside us. We have to get Milady to recruit her brother. We have to not kill or be killed by Douglas as he meanders around the map, loot whatever we want from the 2 treasure chambers, and don't get struck down by a literal act of God from some jackass shooting you from the parking lot with satellite-guided lightning bolts. If I wanted to be even more particular about this, I could add more, like stealing the Delphi shield from the boss or using the secret shop on this level, but at this point, you probably see the point I'm trying to make. Chapter 16 has so much going on. And honestly, I kind of love it. During my playthrough of this game, I've had a couple levels frustrate me, mostly Arcadia, but this is one that is actually pretty fun in my opinion. It has so much going on that it creates this weird scenario that I'm just not used to as someone who has played quite a few of these games at this point. Sure, I got bolting to time or two, but then I ended up in this situation where I'm clearing the left side of the map while slowly running away from Douglas, and it's really kind of silly and kind of interesting. I'm obviously playing very inefficiently, but this is literally my first playthrough of the game, so who cares? That's half the fun, and, probably how the game's supposed to go anyway. I understand now that there are probably some much more consistent strategies to beating this level, but man, this is definitely the most memorable chapter of this game for me so far. I mean, it must be memorable since I decided to write a whole video about just talking about this chapter specifically, so I hope you enjoyed it. Whether you're familiar with the franchise or not, glad you took the time to check it out, and if you liked it, then hey, like it, I guess. They have a whole button specifically for that function, and feel free to subscribe as well to see whatever it is I do next. Also, Arcadia is not a fun level.